Hi, I'm Dylan Paris, and this is my long-term review of the iPad Pro 2020. So this isn't actually my first iPad Pro. I owned the original iPad Pro for about half a year when it came out in 2015. I then upgraded or side-graded to the 9.7-inch model when that came out the next year. I then ended up not really using the iPad very much. And so I ended up selling that iPad, and I didn't have one again until 2018 when I got the 2018 11-inch iPad Pro. I used that device for over a year, and I got a lot of really great use out of it. A lot of my early videos on this channel were edited in LumaFusion. A lot of those videos focused on iPad music production, which I did on that iPad. And then I sold that iPad and eventually got an iPad mini, because I also had gotten a MacBook Pro 2020 and I didn't think I needed an iPad Pro and a MacBook Pro at the same time. But the iPad mini was way too small. It hurt my old man eyes to use it too long, and so I found myself not doing a bunch of really fun iPad stuff anymore. Because of this, I ended up getting a 2020 iPad Pro 12.9-inch model, which is the one I've been using for most of this year. And spoiler alert, it's very good. The iPad Pro, in my opinion, over the last couple of years has finally become the device it was always meant to be. With the introduction of iPadOS with iOS 13 splitting off into iPadOS and iOS, and then the improvements that we've seen since the launch of iPadOS, including full support for mouse and keyboard and the Magic Keyboard case, the iPad has truly become its own unique computing experience. I've made a few videos on selling iPads and buying MacBooks and selling MacBooks and buying iPads, so I may not be the best source of truth on this, but I will say this. I sold a 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro with 1 terabyte SSD, a really good graphics card, and an i9 processor in favor of my iPad Pro 2020. All of the videos that I've made over the last month, many of which are doing pretty well, were all edited in LumaFusion. The thumbnails were created using exports from those videos in LumaFusion. I would then bring the exports into either Affinity Photo or Procreate and would then shrink them into YouTube preferred size of 1280 by 720. The iPad Pro, as I see it, is an underrated device. Oftentimes it's compared to other laptops. Apple does this themselves when they compare it to being faster than many other Windows machines. The problem is that when you put it head to head with a Windows machine or even a MacBook, you start to encounter the fact that there are huge discrepancies in workflow style. Learning iPad means learning a new paradigm. But over the course of the last few years, and especially this year, I have found that that new paradigm is worth the switch. Now, a really important caveat here is that I have a desktop I built. I always mention this in my videos because a lot of YouTubers will say, oh, I'm full-time iPad now, and I don't want to mislead you. For about 5% or less of my entire computing workflow, I would use my desktop. This would mostly be for Ableton Live, specifically finishing my album that's coming out on the 1st of November called There's Something Better. Check it out on all streaming services or Bandcamp, linked below. But all of the tools I needed to finish those songs and the original song files were in Ableton, so that's where I did that work. Just about every other single computing task I've done that's not for my day job, which I have a separate computer for, shout out to corporate America, those tasks have been done with my iPad Pro. This includes music production, video consumption, video creation, photo manipulation, web browsing, messaging, all kinds of different tasks, all on the iPad Pro. And a lot of the things that really stressed me out or seemed like pain points even a year ago are not a problem now. External storage works pretty much seamlessly. The introduction of the Magic Keyboard has really covered that last mile for me of user interface scenarios, and it also makes it a really good stand for the iPad, so that I want to bring it around everywhere and watch videos on it because it's just so easy to get the angle I want now. When editing videos in LumaFusion, I now have the decision of, do I want to use a trackpad and have a more laptop-like experience, or do I want to use touch and go on my balcony and edit videos at night looking out at the city? These are workflows I just didn't really have before, and even if I had the laptop side of it, I now have a choice. Now you might be screaming, but a Surface Pro has done this for years, and in some ways you'd be right. But, and I'm not the first person to say this, the Surface was always a PC trying to be a tablet, and the iPad has always been a tablet trying to be something else. The iPad-specific app ecosystem is so robust and powerful that it dwarfs every other competitor. There simply isn't a LumaFusion for Android, or for that matter, the Surface. If you run something like DaVinci Resolve or any other video editing application on a surface, you're gonna hit walls well before you hit them on the iPad. This in part is because of the really robust software ecosystem and the fact that LumaFusion was designed for the ground up on iPad as well as iMovie and other apps. But this is also because the processor in the iPad is exceptionally powerful. The iPad Pro that I have has an A12Z. The upcoming iPad Air, which I believe comes out this month, will have an A14 in it. And also, if you want my final verdict, I can kind of give it in advance. If you're looking at buying an iPad this year and you don't need a 12.9-inch screen or 120 Hz display, you should buy an iPad Air, not the iPad Pro. If the iPad Air existed when I bought the iPad Pro, I would really have strongly considered the iPad Air. But that being said, I really like the 12.9-inch screen. It has totally transformed how I use the iPad, and I consider it a very strong selling point, so bear that in mind. The iPad has become my go-to device for just about everything except for gaming. And even gaming, I sometimes take advantage of the iPad. I'm not really using too many native iPad games, but rather I use apps like Moonlight or PS4 Remote Play to play games on other devices on my iPad. And those experiences have been exceptional. I actually have an Xbox Series X pre-ordered. I'm very excited about it. And I'm very excited to try Remote Play via the Series X as well. I'm pretty certain it's gonna be great, just like all the other Remote Play services. Now, if you're a hardcore professional content creator and you're looking at going iPad or going some kind of PC platform or Mac platform, I would not recommend making the iPad your only device if you have a lot of workflows that depend on applications like Adobe After Effects or DaVinci Resolve. Really intense motion graphics or CG-based workflows just don't really exist on the iPad yet. I actually think this will be a different conversation in about 4 years when the Macs have moved to the Apple series of chips and developers who make apps such as 3ds Max or Maya or Unity start porting those more powerful tools to Apple Silicon. And if you're thinking that's a pipe dream, I would just say look at how much has changed over the last 5 years of iPad. How we went from a very basic GarageBand to something that you could make really substantial music with using a really robust suite of audio unit applications. And if you didn't want GarageBand, there are now at least 5 very good DAW options on iPad. Oftentimes people will ask me, oh, what is the best DAW on iPad? Oh, and DAW is Digital Audio Workstation, if you did not know. These applications are used for music production. And the truth is, because music apps on iPad are so much cheaper than they are on other platforms, I actually have a couple of preferred DAWs, and all of them bought together would still be less than my discounted copy of Ableton Live 10. Now, do I miss the apps on Mac? To a degree, but LumaFusion has come a really long way. There are very few features that doesn't have that I wish it did, and almost every wall I run into in LumaFusion now is something I can find my way around. I also find it to be faster and more fun to work with, and the fact that it's on a tablet screen instead of just a laptop I have to haul around means that I can use it in places I wouldn't always use my MacBook, such as on my balcony, or just sitting on the couch, tablet style. I really do actually think an iPad Pro, or an iPad Air for that matter, could be someone's entire computing platform, with a couple of big caveats. If you're doing professional work, and when I say professional, I mean high-end, highly technical, high-level work in video, music, motion graphics, or even something like coding, those workflows are not at a finalized place yet. But I believe there's hope. Take, for instance, Native Instruments' complete suite of music applications. Native Instruments recently launched a computerless version of their Machina platform called the Machina Plus. I know this because I'm obsessed with it, but it's $1,400, so I'm not gonna buy it. At least until this channel starts making me the kind of money where I can get stuff for free, or buy it and bill it to the company. But that said, the Machina Plus has an Intel Atom processor with 4 GB of RAM, and it's running a bunch of Native Instruments VSTs and sample libraries. Why do I mention this? Well, the iPad Air has 4 gigs of RAM, my iPad Pro has 6 gigs of RAM, and the processor probably runs marathons around the Intel Atom chip in the Machina Plus. This is to say that the technical specifications needed to run pro-level software are very likely already in iPads that are already shipping today. At this point, it's just a matter of time before we start getting applications like Logic Pro, Final Cut, maybe even Ableton, maybe even true Machina, and not just iMachina, which hasn't been updated in eons. And when we start seeing those apps on these devices, the game will change. With mouse support and keyboard support, the barrier to entry for something like Unity or Blender or other applications is smaller than it used to be. I'm not saying that there won't be limitations. I'm just saying that limitations breed creativity, and these devices are extremely powerful. So what are the big cons? Well, there's not as many as there used to be. If you just need raw power for raw price, you'll probably get more bang for your buck on just the standard iPad, the one they add the year number to every year and keep putting out in a body that came out, I don't know, when I was in high school. You can get that. And honestly, I think the iPad is a really good starter device, and it punches so far above its price tag that you're gonna get a lot of mileage out of it. Why would you upgrade to something like a Pro or the new Air? Well, the Apple Pencil 2 is a really cool device if you're an artist. I really like how it charges, I really like how it attaches to the device. Because I'm home all the time, my Apple Pencil is just basically always here. And it's great. If you want some of the better workflows though that I've been talking about, your only option until the 2020 Air was announced was to get a Pro, either 11 or 12.9, but now you could get the iPad Air. I recommend either of these devices, specifically the Air if you don't think you're gonna need all the 6 gigs of RAM or a larger screen. And one of the biggest reasons I recommend either the Air or the Pro is the Magic Keyboard. I did a separate video about this, but the Magic Keyboard is so good. I didn't even buy it for a really long time because I knew and I feared that it would be so good that owning an iPad and a MacBook wouldn't make sense. And that was true. Once I had the Magic Keyboard, I just never wanted to use my MacBook because I suddenly had a laptop experience. Except at any point, I can just take the screen off, bring it with me, and do whatever I want. If you're a regular viewer of my channel, you probably know that I've used the iPad for all kinds of music production. Arguably, the iPad is what has made my channel what it is today. Not just because I've made so many videos about music production, but also because I've used my iPad and the iPad Pro 11 I had before to make so much of the content on this channel. And moving forward, at least for the last month, and presumably indefinitely, all of these videos are being shot on my Lumix G85 and then brought over onto the iPad into LumaFusion, edited and uploaded directly from LumaFusion in 4K. The workflow for what I do is already basically there. The only real gap is music production. And even that is mildly being solved because I've started moving over into a more hardware-based workflow using the MC707, as you can probably see in the last couple videos I've uploaded. I think you could say that I've had a tumultuous relationship with the iPad. It is not always perfect, and every now and then you will run into a wall. But the iPad, more so than almost any other Apple product, feels like one in which Apple is actually listening and actively making better at a pace I've never seen them do before. I would not be surprised that in a year this video will be dated because a bunch of really good Pro apps will be on the device, and some of my larger wants and desires will already be resolved. And those changes will likely come to devices that you already own or I already own and won't require a brand new purchase, because the lifetime support of an iPad is like 5 years rather than the 2 years of a lot of phones. The iPad is so good that between the AirPods going back and forth between my phone and my iPad without me touching or switching anything thanks to the new 14 updates, and the fact that I can resume messages and resume processes from my phone onto the iPad, I'm keeping an iPhone instead of looking at the cheaper, more powerful Android phones on the market. Apple's ecosystem is in full effect because the accessories around the iPhone are so good they're making me keep an iPhone. And one of those biggest, literally, and of importance factors is the iPad Pro. Do I think you should buy an iPad Pro? Yes and no. Like I said, the Air is a cheaper option. It has a more powerful processor. The reasons to get an Air versus a Pro are really up to personal preference unless you really, really need screen size. I'm not really a great artist. I probably didn't need to buy the Apple Pencil, but I just love having that larger screen. The form factor for video editing and for music production really helps with both the fact I have old man eyes and just the overall scale of the experience. However, I used an 11-inch iPad Pro for over a year. I had no problems with the screen size, and that is the same exact body you're gonna find in the Air. If you're watching this trying to decide between the two and you can save substantial amounts of money on an Air, maybe get an Air. You could also potentially look at the 2018 12.9-inch iPad Pro to save some money. I personally have never used LiDAR on this iPad, and I'm not sure I've ever hit a RAM wall, and I'm not sure I will for a very long time. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. If you'd like to help my channel grow and see more of the awesome content I'm making every single week, consider liking and subscribing and commenting with how you're using your iPad or what you want to see come to the iPad. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next week.